put yourself in this position, okay? You don't have the money for an expensive European car, so you buy one used, like 5 or 6 years old, and it only costs you 30-something thousand bucks, so that seems like a dead set bargain, doesn't it? Imagine picking it up, the Euphoria Shetra, and then being told, just a hop, skip and a jump later, that it's gonna cost $25,000 to fix, and P.S. it's not running the way it is. This is a major disaster on the cusp of Christmas, and I guess, therefore, this report is a PSA of sorts, because it could have so easily been prevented. Today's report comes courtesy of one of you, only named Jack, and emailing me on behalf of a quote-unquote friend. Isn't it always the way? Anyway, let's get right into it. Now, Jack did kick off with a whole bunch of really nice, somewhat sucky things, alleging honesty and integrity and things of this nature. I didn't think I should inflict that on you. I mean, I was already going to do his story, so... Jack says, a friend of mine, I'm not even going to read him out in a bogan voice, like a friend of mine recently purchased a 2018 T6 Volvo XC90, second-hand, brackets. I know, they never call you before they purchase. Isn't that the truth? Like, you could set them straight up front and just prevent this whole thing from happening, couldn't you? Say, buy a Camry that's half the age, dude, sort of thing, or a Kluger, you know, come on. Anything from Mitsubishi or Toyota or Hyundai or Kia, some SUV, it's got to be better value. Like, come on, much more reliable, more warranty, generally, things of that nature. Anyway, and after a few months and a few thousand kilometres, ask tow truck drivers which brands keep them afloat, dude. It's always European car owners. Those tow truck drivers, they got, 15 children, they're all at private schools. The Japanese car industry can't support that, I'd suggest. So, after this time, few months and a few thousand kilometres, his car threw an engine light while driving on the highway, so he pulled up and had it towed to the nearest Volvo dealer, what was second prize, where he was told the engine was worn out. Cactus. It was an ex-Parrot. Far out, dude, on the cusp of Christmas. He's going to need a new engine at the cost of $25,000. Ouch! Considering he bought the car for $32,000 or so, it was a shock and sent him into panic mode. Oh, dude, there's a reason the defibrillator is always in the service department. Like, you think the new car is expensive. Now, let us just pause for a second at this point, shall we? And just think about that car. If you're not familiar with it, and let's face it, Volvo is kind of irrelevant in Australia, but I think it's like minimalist Mercedes-Benz, some people. But anyway, this T6, okay, it's a 4-cylinder turbo supercharged engine from Volvo. What about owning this seems like a good idea? Because I'm not seeing it, particularly at the age of 6. Like, Jesus, the warranty is long expired, and in any case, it wouldn't help. We'll get to that. But this car was $100,000 new. Like, 5 and a bit years later, it's $32,000. Doesn't that have to tell you something about underlying quality and etc.? Anyway, it's got a 2-ton tare weight, like empty, it weighs 2 tons. So this is a big, hefty hunk or whatever, and it's being hauled around by a 2-litre turbo supercharged engine, and it's a petrol engine, okay, and it makes, I wrote it down, 235 kilowatts at about 5,700 and 400 Newton meters. So I'd suggest they've got the wick and they've cranked it right up, and it probably went really well before it went poopy in its duds. It's got a 5.9 litre sump, and it runs, I almost can't say it. It runs 0W20 oil. Everything about this car, even if it's the perfect example, and this one wasn't, screams buy something Japanese instead, because you can't afford it. The Warrior X4 is Olight's toughest torch in the tactical series, and it features a host of upgrades over its predecessor. Super bright 2600 lumens, easy to find tail switch, drop tested to 2 meters, and IPX8 waterproof. It's a bit big for the pocket, so it comes with this awesome polymer holster, which delivers great security on the belt. It's easy to deploy in the field, and the torch doesn't have to leave the holster to recharge. You could also easily breach a tempered glass car window with the stainless steel strike bezel if you ever needed to rescue a kid or a pet from a hot car, for example, or help a victim of a car crash in the aftermath. Great for search, signalling, or off-roading, or maybe boating. If you need something a bit more EDC friendly for the pocket, try the Olight Arcfeld Ultra, which combines a torch, a laser pointer, and a UV light in a slimline monoblock of proprietary grade aluminium alloy that's actually 1.7 times harder than ordinary aluminium and has 1.7 times more tensile strength than TA2 titanium. The Warrior X4 is 40% off right now, and the Arcfeld Ultra is 35% off until December the 4th during Olight's Black Friday sale. I'll put links to all of this in the description, and you can take another $5 off with discount code JC5 until the 4th. Olight's also going to select 5 lucky Auto Expert customers and give away 1 free swivel to each. The swivel is an awesome workshop LED and torch all wrapped up in the one versatile device. Full sale highlights and discount details in the description. Okay, back to Jack now. Jack says, I've done a bit of research for him and I've discovered that this is a pretty well-known issue, that these earlier examples of this model are oil burners. Yeah, just look up Volvo XC90 T6 oil consumption problem and just tsunami of people with similar problems, generally in the United States, go figure. Pretty well-known issue, oil burners. However, upon checking his service schedule, all from Volvo, the previous owner, while servicing annually, didn't quite make the 15,000k services. This is really gonna bite him in the arse, this friend. It really is. In each case, he's a few thousand k's over, usually up to 5,000 kilometres max. That's not the way I read it. The diagnostic report from Volvo's Central Coast has advised that the 6,000 kilometres get it right, in the 6,000 kilometres since the last service, which included oil and new spark plugs, they had to top up 3.5 litres of oil. It's only got a 5.9 litre sump. 5.9 minus 3.5 is like 2.4, dude. That engine is running around with its supercharger and its turbocharger, spinning at, I don't know, 20,000 RPM. Not the supercharger, but the turbo, certainly. And it's doing it on 2.5 litres of what would have to be by then fairly rancid oil, I'd suggest. So what could possibly go wrong? 3.5 litre oil top-up. You're supposed to check your engine oil every second time you fill up your car, or at least monthly. Like, is it really that difficult? Anyway, the car had only done about 120,000 kilometres. Okay, so that's 3 laps of planet Earth around the equator, not an insubstantial distance. And Jack says, and that sounds like a huge amount of oil to me to top up between services. If he had serviced on time, I would have told him to hit Volvo up hard for a new motor. It's on them really, but I don't know how much leeway you can get if the car is serviced but a bit out. Well, the problem here, we'll get to that, but it's not a bit out. I've just calculated Acouture there, and there's a couple that are quite a bit out. Yeah, there are, dude. But most are 1,000 to 3,000 kilometres out. Like, that's only Sydney to I don't know, Brisbane and back, and then to Brisbane and back. What is hard about getting your car serviced on time? All these people run late, and with European cars in particular, Jesus. First column, okay, so at this point, I'll put the numbers up on the screen and you can check them out with me, dude, and see if you think that is an accurate assessment of the disparity between the requirement and the actual servicing distances. And at first, what I want to say here is that servicing your car, if your car's got an annual service interval, most service intervals, and you should look yours up specifically, but most service intervals are time and distance based, whichever occurs first. It's usually 12 months and 15,000. Okay, so if you get to 15,000 in 8 months, get it freaking serviced, because that's how this works. And this is kind of important down the track once your warranty expires and you're looking down the barrel of a $25,000 bill for Cactus engine. So just anyway, reviewing these numbers, this car's done like 120,000 Ks, which means it should have had 8 services by now, and it's had 6. So that tells you something, doesn't it? And every one of them has been late. Only the last one was about 1,000 Ks over. First one, nearly 4,000 Ks late. Second one, nearly 3,000 Ks late. Third one, nearly 6,500 Ks late. Jesus. Just looking at this in the ballpark, if you're 6,000 Ks late on a 15,000 K service interval, you're 40% of the way to what should be the next service. Like, this is not just, missed it by that much, is it? And service number 4, Jesus, 10,600-ish Ks late. Like, it's all over. You're 2/3 of the way to the next service and you still haven't got the one that you should have had 10,600 Ks ago. And you're in an engine that's notorious for burning oil, running really thin oil, 0W20, so thin. It must have such an additive package and be so vulnerable to things like fuel dilution and short distance running and things of that nature. Like the oil is something that wears out. People don't get this. If you're 10,600 Ks over, dude, it's all over. Next service, 2,400 Ks out. That's still, what, 15%? Like, come on. And the final one, nearly 1,200. Like, there is a responsibility. It's a bilateral responsibility. It's your responsibility as the owner to get your car serviced on time. It's their responsibility to look after you if there's a premature failure and you got your car serviced on time. So docking procedures in the middle there's responsibilities bilaterally. If you dishonour yours, then there's no way you're getting looked after. It doesn't work that way. So anyway, Jack goes on and he concludes by saying, what do you think, if any, are his options? If you wish to see any of the documentation, I don't need to see it. I've seen it all and can organise for you to share it with you. Thanks again for your time. Keep up the great work. Again, even if you do give EVs a bit of a hard time. So Jack's a closet evangelist. That's kind of interesting to me. You know, I don't give EVs a hard time. I'm a pragmatist about the deployment of EVs, right? The problem with EVs is that they're being deployed with this quasi-religious fervour, aren't they? There are people who think that EVs are the solution and we're all going to be driving one, and net zero is a paradise that we can all motor off to. And I'd suggest that almost everything you've been told about EVs is bullshit. They're not simpler, they're not less complex, flip sides of the same coin, and therefore more reliable. It doesn't work that way. They're more complex and they're differently complex, and they're nowhere near as reliable because we haven't had batteries that big deployed widely in such a harsh environment before. And there are lots of defects that are coming to light with battery manufacturing. Just ask Jaguar currently, like, Jesus. They had, what, 5 recalls of the I-Pace, and this is in the United States recently, and now they got to buy back, like, I forget what the number was, about 2,800 of those things after trying to fix them with a software recall, sort of software update-based recall 4 times. On the 5th go, they've just said, fuck it, we're buying the cars back. Like, EVs are a looming disaster in so many ways, and we're not grappling with the integration. So I don't get into EVs. I try and point out the obvious problems, including that they're only ever going to suit about 20% of the driving population. This is just a bunch of facts. Sorry, Jack. Anyway, buying a used European car is almost always a mistake, because even though the car starts off at like 100 grand and you pick it up for a song and you think, yes, virtually the same as a new one, the thing that doesn't depreciate like the price of the car is the price of having it fixed. Okay, it still pretends to be a $100,000 car. I had a mate who was a cameraman at Channel 7, and we're out doing some story, this is years ago for Today Tonight, and he goes, John, I'm thinking about buying a used BMW X5. What do you think? I said, don't do it. Don't be an idiot. Buy a Kluger or something. Buy a Santa Fe. It doesn't matter. A Sorrento, whatever. Buy a Mazda CX-9, CX-8. It doesn't matter. Just not one of those European cars that's like 4 years out of warranty. Just don't do it to yourself. Anyway, he goes, he really wanted it. I think his missus really wanted it. And anyway, he owned it for 3 months and the transmission started to misshift, and that was like a $15,000 mistake. So in addition to just European cars being a bit shit on reliability, Volvo is kind of Swedish Jeep when it comes to customer care. And by that I mean customer couldn't give a shit culture. Because, you know, Volvo's been on the scrap heap for years now. It was owned by Ford as part of that twisted freak organisation division of Ford called the Premier Automotive Group, which included Jaguar Land Rover, and that worked out so well, Volvo and Aston Martin. Okay, so the big 3 American automakers go tits up in the financial crisis, and they all get in their own corporate jets and on the same day fly independently to Congress to beg for more money so they don't go bankrupt. And this is like, one of the congressmen got worded up about that and sort of said, couldn't you guys have all jet pooled or something? Because they flew separate corporate private jets from Detroit to Washington to beg. Like, what's wrong with that picture? Anywho, that's kind of the culture of the American Big Three back then. And ultimately, of course, General Motors and Chrysler went bankrupt. But Ford had this epic fire sale and basically got rid of all of these low-hanging fruit type assets. They sold Aston Martin to a group of Middle Eastern investors. They sold Jaguar Land Rover to Tata in India, and that's working out so well currently, isn't it? They're putting the trans back in transportation kind of thing. And of course, now we've got Volvo, which Ford fire sailed to Geely, the Chinese automaker, that really just wanted Volvo's technology to proliferate throughout its range. And that's why Volvo's a shit sandwich today, basically. And they've been allowed to get away with creating these sort of overwound up, under-lubricated, badly designed shitbox engines like the 2-litre T6. Anyway, the service history, irrespective of all of that, and the fact that oil consumption is a known problem with this engine, if you service your car or fail to service your car on time, if you service your car like we saw, then there's no claim, you know, because the manufacturer can just go, look, you've breached the servicing obligations on 6 occasions, the car's massively overdue, and if you hadn't done that, it wouldn't have happened. This is on you. And Consumer Court in Australia is going to go, yeah, dude, it's on you. And even if it's not on you technically, because you didn't miss all of those services, the first owner did, it's your problem. Like, it's your mess to clean up. It's your rebuild to pay for, whatever, okay? Now, cars have service indicators too. I'd have to say it's virtually impossible not to know that your car is overdue for a service, because there's a light on the dash that says, hey, dickhead, get your car serviced. Like, come on. Anyway, There's no question about the oil consumption problem with this engine, but if you cut yourself off at the knees by failing to service your car, then you're not going to be able to make that claim. There'll be a counterclaim against you for neglect kind of thing, and the court will see it their way. That's just what happens in practice. And even though that aspect of the neglect is on the previous owner, I'd suggest that Jack's mate here has to bear the responsibility for not doing the due diligence before buying this car, because a failure to service on 6 occasions by up to 10,500 Ks, that is the hugest red flag of red flags to just move on to the next one, dude. Like, come on. If you see that in the service history, which you should always interrogate, especially if you're buying a late model used car, like 20 years old, probably not that relevant, but 5 or 6 years old, absolutely vital, because we're still inside the window where even though the warranty could have expired, you've still got consumer law entitlements irrespective of the warranty status. So let's say your car's done fewer than 160,000 kilometres and it's less than 10 years old. If it develops this oil consumption problem and it's got the perfect service history, you've always had it serviced on time, then you've got a great claim against them, and it's going to be highly likely that they're going to be replacing the engine at their cost, which is exactly what you want in this situation. But if you shoot yourself in the junk in this way by just delaying being late with every service, you haven't got a leg to stand on. So the neglect is on the previous owner, but if you're looking now for a used car of any brand and you see that kind of neglect, then don't walk away, just run. Dude, it doesn't matter how immaculately it presents, how nice the paint and panel work is, and how nice the people selling it are. If it's been neglected like that, just run. So to answer Jack's question at the end, like, can I offer a ray of hope to the poor punter here? The options are you could just scrap it, because it's ridiculous to spend 25 grand on a car that's probably only worth 25 grand now. Let's face it, like, why bother? Okay. So if you can get a few $1,000 for scrapping it, great. Or you could find, perhaps if you're dead set lucky, you could find a functional used engine at a fraction of that cost and talk to an independent mechanic, preferably one who understands European cars, preferably one who's worked on Volvos a fair bit. If you can find someone like that, then yeah, dude, like, go for it. Just get a used engine and stick it in that car, but do appropriate tests on the engine first. Otherwise, you might be just, transplanting an oil consumption problem into a car that previously had an oil consumption problem. Now, I don't know if it's possible or easy to get the existing engine rebuilt to some extent. Sounds like you need to do a fairly major rebuild though. Having said that, a privateer and a specialist in that area would probably be able to rebuild it and not get it to as new, but you could probably rebuild it to the point where it wasn't consuming as much oil by boring and/or bloody insects, dude. I tell you what, lately it's been insect heaven here. It's been a cornucopia of insects. We've got flesh-eating frickin' cicadas outside, and the sky turns black with blowflies in here because it's a nice cool cave and there's bat shit everywhere, obviously. And I've got a couple of bats living in the stairwell. It's like, I love nature. It's awesome. Anyway, you could probably get a bore and/or a hone, new pistons, rebuild the short motor kind of thing. If the head's okay, you might get away with that. New timing chain, whatever. It could be new oil pump, obviously, but it could be, halfway to good as new kind of thing at a fraction of the cost. I don't know. I don't know if it's worth doing that, but you'd want to investigate it, right? Obviously, spending $25,000 on a 6-year-old shitbox is just, hopeless, fool's errand. But if you've got to scrap it and get rid of it, buy a Kluger, buy a Prado, buy, I don't know, buy a Santa Fe or a Sorrento. If you need that 7-seat thing, if you want that big beefy SUV, get one of them, CX-9, CX-8. There's so much choice that's not objectively crap and which won't cost you an absolute arm and a leg if something goes wrong. And pro tip, check the service history and make sure that all of those services have been done on time, just in case the engine does another, deuce in its duds and you're at a different dealership having the same conversation over the counter.